Ray, what religion were you raised in?
I was raised Roman Catholic.
Me too. And I'm sure you're aware Roman Catholicism has many strange beliefs and practices.
Very true. Angels, demons, God, the devil, purgatory, sinners, saints. It's tough to keep track.
Well, you may be surprised to learn that Woonsocket, Rhode Island, was once home to America's only case of stigmata. I'm Jeff Belanger.
And I'm Ray Auger, and welcome to the New England Legends podcast. Okay, stigmata. The Catholic boy in me is having some pretty scary flashbacks right now.
So you do know what it is.
It's when a person, usually a highly devout Roman Catholic, suffers some or all of the wounds Jesus Christ suffered during the crucifixion.
That's right. And some people may bleed from their palms or from the backs of their hands. Others bleed from their feet, some from their sides, and a few even exhibit bleeding from their foreheads, where we're told the crown of thorns was placed on Jesus' head.
I remember hearing about these stories in Sunday school. It was gruesome. I never understood how someone's devotion would be rewarded with such extreme suffering.
I've really struggled with that myself. But before we get into the story of Marie Rose Ferron of Woonsocket, Rhode Island, we should explore stigmata a bit. According to the Catholic Education Resource Center, the first recognized case of stigmata was St. Francis of Assisi, who lived from 1181 to 1226. In August of 1224, the priest was praying on Mount Verna in Italy, where he begged to share in the sufferings of Christ. His prayers were answered during the Feast of the Holy Cross on September 14th, 1224. At first, he tried to cover his wounds on his hands, but soon his fellow priests took notice.
The stigmata case I'd heard about was that of Padre Pio, also of Italy.
I think it's agreed that his is the most famous, probably because it's also the most modern.
So Padre Pio was born in Italy in 1887 and became an ordained priest in 1910. In 1918, the story goes, Padre Pio had a vision of being pierced with a lance. He then discovered blood dripping from a gash in his side. That wound in his side stayed with him. Later, he would receive more wounds to his hands and feet. The curious thing about his strange afflictions is that others around Padre Pio reported the cuts gave off a sweet smell instead of the metallic scent of blood. Padre Pio died in 1968. His stigmata case was well documented thanks to television cameras and mass media that was still a relatively new phenomenon during his day.
Ray, I think our modern times still need the occasional miracle in order to keep our attention and faith.
I get that, which is why I'm surprised that I grew up in this region and had never heard about this Woonsocket stigmata case before.
Officially, the Catholic Church never recognized Marie Rose Ferron as a bona fide miracle, but that didn't stop thousands of people from believing they witnessed the hand of God through a sick young woman in Rhode Island who died in 1936. Even to this day, people will visit her grave in the hope of receiving a miracle.
So who is Marie Ferron?
Marie Rose Ferron, or Little Rose as she was so often called, was born May 24th, 1902, in Saint-Germain-de-Grantham, Quebec, in Canada. She was the 10th child of 15 kids. In 1906, her family moved to Fall River, Massachusetts, when she was 4, and when Marie was 13 years old, she suffered a strange paralysis that struck her right hand and feet. The story goes that 2 years later, Marie's hand was miraculously cured after she dipped it in holy water, but her foot never healed. This illness continued to contract and contort her muscles, and for the next 12 years, she could only walk with the aid of crutches. And then she was eventually confined to a bed strapped to a board to keep her legs from twisting any further.
I can imagine how that would be pretty hard for a young person to go through.
Rose wasn't able to go to school like the other kids her age, and that also saddened the young woman. She once wrote,
"I felt as if I were blind, groping in the dark. I had nothing to look forward to, no hope of bettering my condition. I beheld my ignorance ever before my eyes, and that discouraged me more than my infirmities. Time, that softens everything, even sufferings, increased my own and broke my heart."
In 1922, Rose's backstory starts to get a little political. In that year, Bishop William Hickey of Providence, Rhode Island, declares he needs to raise $1 million for the construction of several new high schools for his diocese. Given it's a worthy cause that benefits all families in the diocese, he was shocked when he felt pushback from the French-speaking Catholics in that region. They were upset because the bishop was assessing all of the parishes for these funds. Some of these parishes were already supporting their own French elementary schools, and there was fear there wouldn't be enough money for the high school and these specialized Franco-American schools.
This struggle and fundraising effort goes on for the next few years. But it's not getting any better. The bishop tells his priests not to offer the sacraments to those who won't support his schools. And when the opposition continues, Bishop Hickey excommunicates 56 church leaders.
Wow. Well, that doesn't sound very Christian-like, does it?
I guess business is business, even in the church. So in 1925, the Ferron family moves to Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and it was here that little Rose starts exhibiting signs of stigmata. Near the end of 1926, these strange injuries show up on her arm with no apparent cause. They were purple welts, as if she'd been whipped. And during Lent of 1927, the wounds appeared every Friday. Priests in the church community began taking notice. It was then that Rose's hands and feet began to bleed as if pierced by nails. Rose explained the sensations to her biographer and a priest who witnessed these early wounds.
I feel them tearing apart. They seem to separate into shreds and to be drawn aside.
The priest would describe the smell as smelling sweet, something we heard before in the case of Padre Pio. See, now Bishop Hickey sees an opportunity in little Rose. Her pious reputation is already renowned throughout the region, and these mysterious wounds are being called a miracle by some, causing little Rose to be a little bit of a celebrity. If Hickey can get Rose's support, maybe he can win over the French Catholic community on this fundraiser. So the bishop meets with Rose and sees this perfect victim, an afflicted and righteous child of God who wants nothing more than to help others.
If there's one thing little Rose knows about, it's suffering. I understand that for her, suffering brings her closer to God. So when Bishop Hickey asked Rose to hurt and pray for those he excommunicated, I'm sure she didn't hesitate.
I am willing to suffer as you wish, and for the return of those you have excommunicated. I accept at once. It will be my mission to pray for their return.
This is the point in Rose's story where her stigmata becomes a part of her weekly life. Rose would go into these fits of ecstasy. At one point during these episodes, she called out,
Take away my speech if that will help. Take my eyes. Take my mind. Take everything I have and cherish. I am ready to suffer until the last one is converted, even 100 years if you so wish it.
And during Lent of 1929, Rose felt a lance in her side. Then her forehead bore the marks of a crown of thorns.
I feel as if my head is breaking open.
Some of the marks remained all of the time, while others showed up each Friday, then disappeared by Saturday. As word spread, more believers wanted to witness the stigmata miracle for themselves. Others figured little Rose was closer to God and could petition miracles for the sick. And for the bedridden Rose, these visits were often overwhelming.
But people who are desperate and religious will stop at nothing to get help, especially if they need a miracle. I think it's also worth noting that all of this is being documented, so it's not just hearsay. We've posted some photos on our website. You can check that out along with this episode.
By 1930, she would bleed from her eyes and mouth. Witnesses said they couldn't understand how someone so frail could lose so much blood and still live. She ate very little solid food, taking only liquid and the Holy Eucharist. But still, she lived on for 6 more years until she died May 11th, 1936. She was 33 years old.
And that's the same age as Jesus at his death.
Right, and the significance of that number wasn't lost on any believers.
There's another mystical Catholic background to Marie Rose that I feel like we should talk about.
Okay.
Marie Rose's mother was Delima Mathau Ferron. She had 15 children and dedicated each one of her kids to a mystery of the Rosary. There are 15 mysteries in total. The 10th mystery of the Rosary is the crucifixion. Marie Rose was the 10th child.
So do you feel she was destined to suffer?
Well, I think some people are. But this story troubles me. The Catholic in me, again, asks why God would reward such a humble and pious soul with such torture. Why would a bishop exploit her? And why doesn't the church recognize little Rose as a true miracle?
I can't answer the first 2 questions, but the third? In 1964, Bishop Russell McVinney of Providence, Rhode Island, led an inquiry into the case of little Rose's potential canonization into sainthood, but the bishop decided against pressing the case any further. He alone decided he saw no miracle. Today, La Petite Rose is buried in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Her grave is often covered with fresh roses as people still seek her out for miracles, even if the Catholic Church never saw enough evidence to recommend sainthood.
What's the name of the boneyard where she's buried?
It's called Precious Blood Cemetery.
To see photos of Marie Rose Ferron and her grave, or to listen to our past episodes, visit our website at OurNewEnglandLegends.com.
And do us a favor, post a review on iTunes and tell others about our podcast. It's the biggest way you can help us out. And if you have a story you'd like us to check out, you can email us through our website.
Until next time, remember, the bizarre is closer than you think.